Chapter 1. The woman who didn't look back. He didn't see the gun until it was too late. The thing about working the late shift at Aurelio's is that you learn to ignore things. The whispered conversations in Italian. The men in expensive suits who never look at the menu. The way certain tables in the back corner stay reserved even on our busiest nights. A velvet rope that might as well be made of razor wire. You pour the wine. You smile. You don't ask questions. I'd been doing this for 8 months, ever since I'd moved to the city with nothing but a duffel bag and a determination to disappear. The restaurant paid cash, asked few questions, and let me fade into the background of other people's lives. Exactly what I needed. Tonight started like any other Tuesday. Rain hammering the windows. The smell of garlic and wine and expensive cologne. My feet aching in shoes that were one shift away from falling apart. Table 12 had been occupied since 9. 4 men, all in dark suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I'd served them twice already, wine, and a pasty, more wine. The one at the head of the table hadn't looked at me once. Not when I poured his Brolo. Not when I set down his Osso Buco. Not even when I'd had to reach across him to clear a plate. Most men looked. He didn't. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself the tight feeling in my chest was relief, not something else entirely. Sophia. Marco, the floor manager, appeared at my elbow, his face gray. Take your break. Now. I just started my now. Something in his voice made my hands go cold. Marco had been in this business for 30 years. Nothing rattled him. But his fingers trembled as he adjusted his tie, and his eyes kept darting toward table 12. I set down my tray. Headed toward the back. I made it 3 steps before I heard the crash. The sound of breaking glass. A chair scraping back. Then a voice, low, Italian, furious, cutting through the restaurant's murmur like a blade through silk. I should have kept walking. Should have pushed through those kitchen doors and hidden in the walk-in freezer until whatever was happening had finished happening. Instead, I turned. The man at the head of table 12 was standing now. Even from across the room, I could see the sharp lines of his face. The way his jaw worked as another man younger, more agitated, gestured wildly with something silver catching the light. A gun. My breath stopped. The restaurant had gone silent. The kind of silence that precedes violence. I'd heard it before, in another life, in another city. The silence before my world had shattered the first time. Luca, the standing man's voice was quiet, controlled, but I heard the danger in it. The way you hear thunder in the distance and know the storm is coming. Put it down. You think you can just. The younger man's hand shook. After what you did to put it down. I don't know what made me move. Maybe it was the family, 2 tables over, frozen with their forks halfway to their mouths. Maybe it was the little girl with dark curls who reminded me of someone I used to know. Maybe it was 8 months of successfully not being noticed. And some primal part of me rebelled against watching violence unfold in silence. One more time. I picked up an empty wine bottle from the nearest table. I walked forward. Excuse me. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Gentlemen, I'm going to have to ask you to. Both men turned. The younger one, Luca, swung the gun toward me without thinking, and I saw my death in his eyes. Saw it and recognized it, and felt that old, familiar resignation settle over my shoulders like a coat I'd tried to throw away. But then the other man moved, fast. Faster than someone his size should move. His hand caught Luca's wrist and twisted, and the gun went flying across the marble floor. It skittered under a table. Luca made a sound, rage or pain or both, and lunged, but the dark-haired man caught him by the throat. You forget yourself, he said softly. So softly I almost didn't hear it. And you forget who I am. Luca's face went purple, then white. Basta, someone else at the table said. The man, the one in control. The one who'd moved like violence was a language he spoke fluently. Release Luca. The younger man stumbled back, gasping. And 2 other suits materialized from nowhere to escort him toward the door. The restaurant remained frozen. Then those dark eyes found me. I'd been wrong before. He had looked at me, I just hadn't noticed. Hadn't felt the weight of his attention until now, when it settled on me like a physical thing. His gaze traveled from my face to the wine bottle still clutched in my hand, to my shoes with the split seam, then back up. You were going to hit him with that? His English was perfect, only the barest trace of an accent. His voice was dark honey and broken glass. I was going to ask him to leave. I lied. Something flickered in his expression. Not quite a smile. With a bottle. It's a prop for intimidation purposes. This time, his mouth did curve. Barely. It shouldn't have made my pulse spike. It did anyway. What's your name? He asked. Every instinct I'd honed over 8 months screamed at me to lie. But my mouth, traitorous thing, answered honestly. Sophia Reeves. He studied me for a long moment. Then he turned to one of the remaining men at his table, gray-haired, watchful, and said something in rapid Italian. The only word I caught was my name. When he looked back at me, something had shifted in his expression. Something that made the floor feel unsteady beneath my feet. Go home, Sophia Reeves, he said quietly. And tomorrow, take a different route to work. He sat back down, adjusted his cuffs, picked up his wine glass as if nothing had happened. I stood there, clutching my bottle, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then Marco grabbed my arm and hauled me toward the kitchen. And I didn't see the mafia boss again. Not that night. Chapter 2. The shadow at my door didn't take a different route to work, partly because there was only one subway line that ran from my showbox apartment in Greenpoint to the restaurant in Lower Manhattan. Partly because I'd spent 8 months learning to be invisible. And invisible people didn't suddenly change their patterns because a man in an expensive suit told them to. Mostly because I was tired of running. I'd run from Phoenix. From the life I'd built and the person I'd been before everything went wrong. I'd run until I hit the ocean, then turned north and kept running until I landed here. In a city big enough to swallow people whole. I was done running, even if I couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd moved. The quiet in his voice that had been more frightening than shouting. The weight of his attention. When those dark eyes had finally looked at me. What's your name? I pulled my jacket tighter as I emerged from the subway into the November rain. It was barely 5 in the evening, but the sun had already set, turning the streets into a maze of wet pavement and neon reflections. My shift didn't start for 2 hours. I'd come early to walk, to think, to convince myself that last night had been an aberration. Just another Tuesday at Aurelio's, except I could still see the gun skittering across marble. Could still hear the soft menace in his voice when he'd said, "You forget who I am." Who was he? I'd worked at the restaurant long enough to know what it was. The cash-only payments. The security cameras that didn't actually record. The way the owner, Sal, treated certain customers like visiting dignitaries while others got seated near the kitchen. Aurelio's wasn't just a restaurant. It was a front, a meeting place, a neutral ground for men who did business in the dark. I'd known that when I took the job. I'd needed it anyway. But last night had been different. Last night, the violence that usually stayed buried beneath expensive wine and linen tablecloths had surfaced. And I'd walked straight toward it instead of away. Stupid, I thought, dodging a puddle. So stupid, Sophia. The rain picked up as I turned onto Mulberry Street. I was still 6 blocks from the restaurant when I felt that prickling sensation at the back of my neck. The one that said, "You're being watched." I'd felt it before. In Phoenix, in the weeks before everything fell apart. My ex-boyfriend's paranoia seeping into my skin until I couldn't tell the difference between intuition and manufactured fear. You're imagining it, I told myself. No one's following you. But I took the next left anyway. Then a right. Then another left into an alley I'd never used before. One that smelled like garbage and rain and something darker. The footsteps behind me didn't falter. My heart kicked into a sprint. I walked faster, my hand diving into my purse for my phone, my keys, anything Signorina Reeves. The voice came from in front of me, not behind. I jerked to a stop. A man stepped out from a doorway. Gray-haired, elegant, with the kind of face that had probably been handsome 30 years ago. He wore a charcoal coat that fit too well to be off the rack. His hands were in his pockets. I recognized him. He'd been at table 12 last night. Had sat to the right of the man who'd moved like violence. You didn't listen, he said. His accent was thicker than his companions had been. He told you to take a different route. I don't take orders from, I started. But another figure appeared at the mouth of the alley behind me, cutting off my exit. Younger, broad-shouldered, watching me with the flat expression of a man paid not to care. I was trapped. The gray-haired man sighed. My name is Matteo Greco. I work for someone who is trying very hard to keep you alive. You are making that difficult. I don't need anyone to keep me alive. No? He tilted his head. You don't think Luca Terranova will remember the waitress who interrupted his attempt to shoot Dante Salvatore? You don't think he'll wonder why you were brave or stupid enough to approach a man with a gun? Dante Salvatore. The name landed in my chest like a stone. I'd heard it before, whispered at staff meetings, mentioned in passing by the older waiters who'd worked at Aurelio's since it opened. But the details had always been vague, deliberate. Now I knew why. I didn't do anything, I said. I just asked him to. You walk toward danger. Matteo's expression was almost pitying. In Luca's world, people who walk toward danger are players, not civilians. He will come for you, to send a message to Dante, to prove he is not afraid. The rain was soaking through my jacket now. I was shivering, but not from cold. So what? I managed. You're here to scare me into quitting? Into leaving the city? We're here, Matteo said gently, to bring you somewhere safe until Dante decides what to do with you. I'm not going anywhere. With the man behind me moved. I felt his hand close around my arm, not rough, but firm, and panic exploded in my chest. The old panic. The Phoenix panic. The kind that made me fight even when fighting was useless. I twisted, drove my elbow back, felt it connect with something soft, heard him grunt. My purse swung wild and connected with Matteo's shoulder. He caught it easily, almost apologetically. Signorina, please don't touch me. Basta. The voice cut through the alley like a knife through butter. Low. Controlled. Dangerous. Everyone froze. I turned. Dante Salvatore stood at the alley's entrance. Rain darkening his black coat, his hair curling slightly from the moisture. In the gray light, his face was all sharp angles and shadow. Beautiful in the way that storms are beautiful. Devastating. He looked at the man holding my arm. Let her go, Carlo. The grip released immediately. Then those dark eyes found mine, and I felt the impact of his attention all over again. Felt it, and hated that I felt it. Get in the car, Sophia, he said quietly. We need to talk. Chapter 3. The Devil's Studi got in the car, not because he told me to, not because Carlo and Matteo were standing there like well-dressed sentries, but because the alternative was standing in the rain, pretending I had a choice. And I'd had enough of pretending. The car was a black Mercedes with leather seats that probably cost more than my entire year's salary. Dante slid in beside me, close enough that I could smell him, something expensive and clean with an undertone of smoke. He didn't speak. Just nodded to the driver, and we pulled away from the alley in silence. I watched the city blur past through rain-streaked windows. Watched my reflection, pale, wide-eyed, soaked, and barely recognized the woman staring back. 8 months ago, I'd promised myself I'd never get in a car with a dangerous man again. Yet here I was. Where are we going? My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Somewhere we can talk without Luca's people watching. He adjusted his cuff, a small gesture that drew my attention to his hands. Strong hands, scarred knuckles, hands that had twisted a gun away like it weighed nothing. I don't know anything, I said, about last night, about whatever Luca was angry about. I'm just a waitress. You're a waitress who walks toward men with guns instead of away from them. He turned to look at me, and in the car's dim interior, his eyes were almost black. Why? I wasn't thinking. People who don't think don't survive long in my world. Good thing I'm not in your world then. His mouth curved slightly. Not quite a smile. You are now. The words settled over me like a sentence. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, that I could walk away from this. But I'd seen the look in Matteo's eyes, heard the certainty in his voice when he'd said Luca would come for me. I was in this whether I wanted to be or not. The car turned onto a tree-lined street I didn't recognize. Brownstones with iron gates. Security cameras discreetly positioned. The kind of neighborhood where people paid for privacy and got it. We stopped in front of a building that looked like it had been lifted from a European postcard. 4 stories of dark brick and tall windows, with ivy climbing one wall despite the November cold. Dante got out first, then offered me his hand. I ignored it. Climbed out on my own. His eyes flickered with something, amusement, annoyance, but he said nothing. Just gestured toward the entrance, where Matteo already stood, holding open an ornate door. Inside, the building was even more impressive. Marble floors, crown molding, a staircase that curved upward like something from a Renaissance painting. Everything whispered old money, old power, old secrets. We climbed to the 3rd floor. Dante opened a door at the end of the hallway and stood aside. I hesitated. I'm not going to hurt you, Sophia. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. If I wanted to, I would have done it in the alley. Comforting. I stepped inside. The room was a study. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined to walls, filled with leather-bound volumes in Italian and English. A desk sat near the window, its surface clean except for a crystal decanter and two glasses. A fire burned in the fireplace, casting dancing shadows across Persian rugs and furniture that looked antique but comfortable. It was the kind of room that should have felt warm. Instead, it felt like a trap. Dante closed the door, shrugged out of his wet coat and draped it over a chair. Underneath, he wore a black shirt rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked with a tattoo I couldn't quite make out. Sit, he said, moving to the decanter. You're shivering. I was. I sat in the chair closest to the fire, more to stop my legs from shaking than because he'd told me to. He poured 2 glasses of something amber, then crossed the room and handed me one. Our fingers brushed. The contact was brief, electric. I pulled away too quickly. He noticed. Of course he noticed. He took the chair across from me, leaving the desk between us like a demilitarized zone. Studied me over the rim of his glass. Tell me about Phoenix, he said. The glass nearly slipped from my hand. What? Phoenix, Arizona. Where you lived before you came here. Tell me about it. Ice flooded my veins. How do you? I know everything about you. Sophia Reeves. He took a slow sip. Born in Tucson. Father died when you were 7. Mother remarried 3 years later. You graduated from ASU with a degree in art history. Worked at a gallery in Phoenix for 2 years before he paused. Before you disappeared, my throat closed. You changed your last name, he continued, his voice still that same careful neutrality. Reeves was your mother's maiden name. Before that, you were Sophia Chen. You left Phoenix 8 months ago with $900 and no forwarding address. You've been paying cash for everything. No credit cards, no bank account, no social media presence. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, could only stare at this man who'd just unraveled 8 months of careful hiding in less than a minute. Why? He asked. Why what? Why did you run? The fire crackled. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the windows. I could lie, should lie, but something in his expression stopped me. Not pity, he was too dangerous for pity, but understanding, maybe. The look of someone who recognized running when he saw it. I was engaged, I said finally. My voice sounded distant. To a man who turned out to be someone else. Someone dangerous. When I found out what he really did, who he really worked for, I left. What did he do? I met his eyes. He was a drug runner for the Sinaloa cartel. And when I tried to leave, he said he'd kill me before he let me go. Danny's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the room. A tightening, a darkening. He set down his glass with deliberate care. What was his name? The question was quiet, too quiet. Why does it matter? Because, Dante said, and now his voice carried an edge that made my skin prickle. I need to know if he's still looking for you. Chapter 4. The Price of Protection. Marcus Webb. The name tasted like ash in my mouth. I hadn't spoken it aloud in 8 months. Hadn't let myself think it, except in nightmares. Danny's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He stood, moved to the window, his back to me. Rain streaked the glass like tears. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stared out at the darkening street below. Webb, he repeated finally. I know that name. Of course he did. Men like Dante knew men like Marcus. They probably did business together, traded favors, divided territories like warlords carving up kingdoms. He's not looking for me, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. It's been 8 months. He would have found me by now if he's in prison. Dante turned to face me. Federal custody. Phoenix field office picked him up 6 months ago on trafficking charges. He's awaiting trial. The room tilted. I gripped the chair's armrest to steady myself. You didn't know, Dante observed. I shook my head. Couldn't speak. 6 months. Marcus had been locked up for 6 months. And I'd spent that time looking over my shoulder, jumping at shadows, living like a ghost in my own life. That's why you stayed invisible, Dante continued, moving back toward his chair. You thought he was still hunting you. But someone else knows where you are now. The relief I'd felt evaporated. What do you mean? Luca Terranova. He sat down, picked up his glass again. Last night wasn't random. He came to Aurelio's specifically to kill me, to make a statement. The restaurant is supposed to be neutral ground. Attacking me, there was a declaration of war. I don't understand what that has to do with everything, Sophia. His eyes locked onto mine. You intervened. You made yourself visible. Now Luca will use you to hurt me, to prove I can't protect what's mine. I'm not yours. No, he agreed softly. But he'll think you are. He'll think you matter to me. Why would he think that? Dandy's smile was dark, dangerous. Because I'm bringing you here. Because my men are watching you. Because he paused, seemed to reconsider his words. Because that's how this works. In my world, everything is a symbol. Everyone is a piece on the board. I stood abruptly, sloshing whiskey onto my hand. Then take me off the board. I'll quit Aurelio's. I'll leave the city. I'll disappear again. You can't. He stood too, and suddenly the desk between us felt inadequate. Lucas, people already know where you live. They followed you from your apartment this morning. That's why Matteo was in the alley. We've had a team on you since last night. The whiskey glass slipped from my fingers. It hit the rug without breaking, amber liquid seeping into Persian silk. You've been watching me. My voice shook. Since last night, you've had people following me. To keep you alive, yes. You had no right. I had every right. He moved around the desk, and I stepped back instinctively. He noticed, stopped. The moment you walked toward that gun, you became my responsibility. That's how this works. I didn't ask for your protection. No, you just walked into the middle of a war without knowing what you were doing. His control was slipping. I could hear it in his voice, see it in the tension radiating through his shoulders. Do you understand what Luca will do to you if he gets his hands on you? What he'll do to send me a message? I did. I'd grown up in border states. I'd dated a cartel runner. I knew what men like this did to make their points. So what? I managed. I'm just supposed to stay here? Let you lock me away like some? Yes. The word was final, absolute. Until this is finished. Until Luca is dealt with. You'll stay here, under my protection, where I can keep you safe. That could be weeks, months. I know. I have a life, a job. I can't just. You don't have a life, Sophia. His voice gentled, which somehow made it worse. You have a hiding place. And now that hiding place has been compromised. The truth of it hit like a fist to the stomach. He was right. Everything I'd built here was constructed from smoke and lies. A fake name. A cash-only existence. No friends. No TIs. Nothing real. I'd traded one prison for another, and I'd been calling it freedom. How long? I asked quietly. I don't know. A week, maybe two. Luca is young, impulsive. He'll make a move soon. And when he does, Dante stopped. When he does, it will be finished. I didn't ask what finished meant. Didn't want to know. I want my own room, I said instead. And access to a phone. And if I'm staying here, I need clothes, books, my already arranged. Matteo will bring your things from your apartment tonight. You'll have the room next to the study. Private bathroom. Anything else you need, tell me. He'd thought of everything. Planned for this. Known? I'd say yes, even before I'd known it myself. Why? The question escaped before I could stop it. Why do you care? You don't know me. Don't owe me anything. Dante studied me for a long moment. Then he crossed the remaining distance between us, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. Close enough that I could see the silver scar cutting through his left eyebrow. The faint stubble along his jaw. The way his chest rose and fell with measured breaths. You walked toward the gun, Sophia. His voice was barely above a whisper. When everyone else in that restaurant froze or ran, you walked forward. Either you're the bravest person I've ever met, or the most broken. Either way, his hand rose, hesitated, then brushed a strand of wet hair from my face. The touch was feather light, devastating. Either way, you're under my protection now. His phone buzzed. He stepped back, checked it, and his expression hardened. Matteo will show you to your room, he said. Don't leave this building. Don't go near the windows. Don't trust anyone. I finished. I know the drill. He looked at me then, really looked, and something passed between us. Understanding, maybe. Or recognition. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow, we talk about what comes next. Chapter 5. Proximity and Poisonthroom was beautiful. I hated that I noticed. Hated that some traitorous part of me appreciated the four-poster bed with its silk duvet, the antique vanity, the window seat overlooking a private garden I wasn't allowed to approach. It felt like admiring the bars of a gilded cage. Matteo had brought my things an hour ago, my clothes folded more carefully than I'd ever folded them. My books stacked on the nightstand, even my chipped coffee mug from the Phoenix flea market. Seeing it here, in this expensive room, made my chest ache. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the gun. Saw Luca's face twisted with rage. Saw Dandy's hand wrapping around his throat with casual brutality. You forget who I am. At T2 in the morning. I gave up. Pulled on the silk robe that had been hanging in the bathroom, black, expensive, definitely not mine, and opened my door. The hallway was dark except for a light spilling from beneath the study door. I should have gone back to my room. Should have respected boundaries, kept my distance, remembered that Dante Salvatore was dangerous, regardless of how he'd touched my face. Instead, I walked toward the light. I knocked softly, heard movement inside, then his voice, "Come in." He was still dressed in the same black shirt, though it was more rumpled now, sleeves still rolled up. He sat at his desk, papers spread before him, a glass of whiskey at his elbow. When he saw me, something flickered across his face, surprise, maybe, or something darker. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Can you?" A ghost of a smile. "I don't sleep much." I stepped inside, leaving the door open. A concession to propriety that felt absurd given the circumstances. "What are you working on?" He glanced at the papers, then deliberately turned them face down. "Business. The kind that involves guns?" "Sometimes." I moved to the bookshelf, running my fingers along the spines. Italian poetry, American crime novels, art history texts that looked well read. "You have good taste in books." I had a good teacher. He leaned back in his chair, watching me with that unsettling focus. "My mother. She taught literature before she married my father." It was the first personal thing he'd shared. I turned to look at him. "What happened to her?" "She died when I was 17. Cancer." His voice was neutral, but his fingers tightened around his glass. "My father followed her 6 months later. Heart attack, the doctors said. But I think he just didn't want to live without her." The admission hung between us. I knew I should say something comforting, something appropriate. Instead, I asked, "Is that when you took over?" "Yes." He took a sip of whiskey. 17 years old and suddenly responsible for an empire I barely understood. Men 3 times my age expecting me to know what to do. Enemies circling like sharks. "But you figured it out." "I had to." His eyes met mine. The alternative was dying. I understood that. The necessity of survival. The way it could turn you into someone you didn't recognize. "Why art history?" he asked suddenly. "What?" "Your degree." "Why art history?" I touched the spine of a book on Renaissance painters. Because art is frozen moments. Perfect, unchangeable. You can study a painting for your entire life, and it will always be exactly what it was. No surprises, no betrayals, no life, he said quietly. No pain. They're the same thing. I turned to face him fully. "Are they? You seem pretty alive, and I'm guessing you've caused plenty of pain." "Yes." No hesitation. No shame, but I've felt it too. That's the price of this life. You can't create without destroying, can't protect without harming, can't love without. He stopped abruptly. "Without what?" He stood, crossed to the fireplace, stared into flames that had burned down to embers. "Without losing." The words carried weight. I didn't understand. History I wasn't privy to. I should have left then, gone back to my beautiful prison of a room. Instead, I moved closer. "Have you lost someone you loved?" His shoulders tensed. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, her name was Elena. We were engaged. 3 years ago, a rival family decided the best way to hurt me was through her. His voice was carefully empty. They were right. My breath caught. "Dante, don't." He didn't turn around. "Don't pity me. I knew what this life cost. I chose it anyway." Did she choose it? Now he turned, and the look in his eyes made me step back. Devastated, furious. "No, she chose me, and I got her killed." The silence stretched between us like a wound. "That's why you're protecting me," I said finally. "Not because you owe me, because you couldn't protect her." Maybe. He moved toward me, and I forced myself not to retreat. "Or maybe because you remind me that there are still people brave enough to be stupid, reckless enough to care." He stopped inches away, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. I forgot what that looked like. My heart was hammering. "I'm not her, I know." His hand rose, cupped my jaw with devastating gentleness. His thumb brushed my cheekbone. "You're sharper, more damaged, more." The door slammed open. We sprang apart. Matteo stood in the doorway, his usually composed face tight with urgency. "We have a problem," he said in Italian, then switched to English when his eyes landed on me. "Luca's men just hit one of our shipments. 4 of our people are dead. Danny's expression went cold, flat. The man who'd touched my face disappeared, replaced by something harder, deadlier. Where? His voice was ice. Red Hook. And Dante Mateo hesitated. They left a message. They know she's here. Every molecule of oxygen left the room. Danny's hand went to his pocket, emerged with his phone. Lock down the building. Double the security. No one in or out without my authorization. Already done. Good. He finally looked at me, and I saw the calculation in his eyes. The weighing of options. Go back to your room, Sophia. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me or Mateo. What are you going to do? His smile was terrible, beautiful, frightening. What I should have done last night. I'm going to remind Luca Terranova why people fear my name. Chapter 6. Blood on his hands. He didn't go back to my room. I stood in the hallway, listening to rapid Italian and the sound of footsteps as more men arrived. Voices I didn't recognize. Commands issued in that same clipped, dangerous tone Dante had used in the restaurant. Then silence. I counted to 60 before returning to the study. Empty now. Papers still scattered across the desk. His whiskey glass abandoned. I shouldn't have looked. Should have respected his privacy. But I'd stopped making good decisions the moment I walked toward a man with a gun. The papers were contracts mostly, written in Italian with English translations clipped to each one. Shipping manifests. Warehouse addresses. Numbers that made my head spin. But underneath, half hidden beneath a leather portfolio, I found something else. A photograph. The woman was beautiful. Dark hair, darker eyes, a smile that suggested she knew secrets. She stood on a balcony somewhere warm Mediterranean, maybe wearing a white dress that caught the sun. Happy, alive. Elena? I set it down carefully, guilt twisting in my stomach. This wasn't meant for me. This was his grief, private and preserved. I was turning to leave when I heard the sound. A door opening. Footsteps in the hallway. I froze, remembering Dandy's words. Don't open it for anyone but me or Mateo. But I wasn't in my room. I was somewhere I shouldn't be, looking at things I had no right to see. The study door opened. Dante stood in the doorway. His shirt was streaked with something dark. His knuckles were split and bleeding. There was a cut above his eyebrow that hadn't been there before, blood trickling down the side of his face. Our eyes met. I told you to go to your room. His voice was flat, exhausted. What happened? I moved toward him without thinking. You're bleeding. It's nothing. It's not nothing. I was close enough now to see the damage. The bruising starting to form along his jaw. The way he held his left side like it hurt. Sit down. Sophia, sit down. Something in my tone made him obey. He sank into the chair by the fire, and I disappeared into the bathroom connected to the study. Found a first aid kit under the sink. Of course there was a first aid kit. Men like him probably needed them regularly and returned with supplies. This is not necessary, he said as I knelt in front of him. Be quiet. I dampened a cloth and reached for his face. He caught my wrist gently but firmly. I've had worse. I don't care. I held his gaze until he released me. The cut above his eyebrow wasn't deep, but it was bleeding steadily. I cleaned it carefully, hyper aware of how close we were, how his breathing had changed, how his eyes tracked my every movement. What happened? I asked again, softer this time. I had a conversation with Luca. This doesn't look like a conversation. It was a very emphatic conversation. His mouth quirked slightly. He disagreed with several of my points. I moved to his hands. His knuckles were worse, split open, already swelling. I cleaned them as gently as I could, but he still flinched. Sorry, I murmured. Don't be. His voice had gone rough. I've felt worse pain. That doesn't make this hurt less. He watched me work in silence. Then, you found the photograph. Not a question. My hands stilled. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. It's fine. He flexed his fingers, testing the bandages I'd wrapped. I keep it there to remember. To make sure I never forget the cost of carelessness. That wasn't your fault, wasn't it? His eyes met mine, and the pain in them had nothing to do with his injuries. I knew what I was, what I did. I should never have let her near this life. Should never have been selfish enough to think I could have both the empire and the girl. She loved you. Yes, the word was bitter. And it killed her. I set down the cloth. My hands were shaking slightly, stained with his blood. Is Luca dead? No, I'm not. He studied me for a long moment. You think I should have killed him. I think he's trying to kill you. Kill me. I think I stopped, surprised by the ferocity in my own voice. I think the world would be better without him in it, probably. Dante leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, bringing us eye to eye. But killing him tonight would have started a war I'm not ready to fight. His family is powerful, connected. I needed to send a message, not light a match to the entire city. So what message did you send? His smile was dark. That if he comes after you again, I will burn his empire to the ground and salt the earth where it stood. The words should have frightened me, should have reminded me exactly who I was dealing with. Instead, I felt something else entirely. Something warm and dangerous that coiled in my chest like smoke. You're shaking, he observed. I was. Adrenaline finally catching up. I'm fine, liar. He reached out, cupped my face the same way he had before. Matteo interrupted. His palm was warm, despite the cool cloth I'd used. His thumb traced my cheekbone. You're terrified. Of you? Of this? His other hand found my waist, steadied me. Of what's happening between us. I should have denied it. Should have pulled away. Instead, I leaned into his touch just slightly. Just enough. Dante, he kissed me, soft at first, questioning. His lips tasted like whiskey and violence and something sweeter I couldn't name. I made a sound surprise or surrender and his hand tightened on my waist, pulling me closer. The kiss deepened, turned urgent, and I was drowning in it. In him, in the heat and the danger and the terrible, impossible rightness of it. When he pulled back, we were both breathing hard. That was a mistake, he said roughly. Yes, I shouldn't have known, but neither of us moved. Neither of us looked away. Outside, dawn was breaking. Inside, everything had just become infinitely more complicated. Chapter 7. The photograph that changed everything. Didn't see Dante for 3 days. Matteo brought my meals, stood guard outside my door, answered my questions with polite evasiveness that made me want to throw things. Mr. Salvatore is handling business. Mr. Salvatore will speak with you when he's available. Mr. Salvatore requests that you remain patient. Mr. Salvatore was avoiding me. I spent the time pacing my beautiful cage, reading books I couldn't focus on, staring at the garden I wasn't allowed to enter, replaying the kiss over and over until I'd memorized every second, the way his hand had trembled slightly against my face, the sound he'd made when I'd kissed him back, the look in his eyes when he'd pulled away. That was a mistake, maybe, probably, but it hadn't felt like one. On the 4th morning, I woke to find a box on my vanity that hadn't been there the night before. Inside was a cell phone, new, expensive, and a note in sharp, elegant handwriting, for emergencies only. My number is programmed. The building is secure, but stay away from windows. No apology for disappearing. No acknowledgement of what had happened between us. Just orders and a phone I wasn't sure I wanted. I was still holding the note when someone knocked, not Matteo's efficient double tap. This was harder, more urgent. I opened the door to find a woman I'd never seen before. Mid-40s, dark hair streaked with silver, wearing a simple black dress and an expression that could cut glass. She looked me up and down with the kind of assessment that felt like inventory. So you're the waitress, she said in accented English. And you are? Bianca Salvatore, Dante's aunt. She pushed past me into the room without waiting for an invitation. His father's sister. The one who actually understands how this family works. I closed the door slowly. Does Dante know you're here? Dante is at a meeting with the Bonanos, pretending he has everything under control. She moved to the window, looked out at the garden with practiced ease. He doesn't know I'm here. He doesn't know a lot of things. Like what? She turned to face me, and her eyes were the same dark brown as Danny's, but harder, colder. Like the fact that you're going to get him killed. The words landed like a slap. I didn't ask for any of this. No, you just walked toward a man with a gun in a restaurant full of witnesses. You just made yourself important to the one person Dante cannot afford to care about. She took a step closer. Do you know what happened to the last woman he tried to protect? Elena? The name felt wrong in my mouth. He told me. Did he tell you how she died? The details? Bianca's smile was cruel. They took her from a cafe in broad daylight. Kept her for 3 days while they sent Dante photographs. Her fingers, her hair, pieces of her bit by bit, until he finally agreed to their terms. But by then it was too late. She was already gone. I felt sick. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to understand what you've done, what you are to him. She moved closer still, and I caught the scent of expensive perfume and something sharper underneath. Dante sees you as a second chance, a way to rewrite history. Save the girl this time. Be the hero instead of the man who couldn't protect what mattered. That's not it is exactly that. Her voice was steel. And Luca Terranova knows it. He knows Dante is compromised, distracted, and he's going to use that. Use you. The only question is whether Dante will sacrifice his empire to keep you alive, or sacrifice you to keep his power. You don't know him. I've known him since he was born. She reached into her purse, pulled out a photograph, and handed it to me. I know him better than you ever will. The photograph showed Dante younger, maybe 25, standing beside a burning building. His face was expressionless, but his eyes reflected the flames. On the ground near his feet was something dark. Something that might have been human-shaped. That was his first real test as boss, Bianca said quietly. A traitor in the family. Someone who'd sold information to the families. Someone Dante had grown up with, considered a brother. She paused. He didn't hesitate, didn't show mercy. Because that's who he is, Sophia. That's what he does. My hands were shaking. Why show me this? Because you're falling in love with him. She said it like a diagnosis. A terminal illness. I can see it in your face. The way you defend him. The way you said his name. And love makes people stupid. Makes them believe they can change men who cannot be changed. I'm not falling in love with him. The lie tasted bitter. Bianca's expression softened fractionally. Almost pitying. Then you're smarter than I thought. Smart enough to take the offer I'm about to make. What offer? Leave. Tonight, I have a car waiting. Enough money to disappear properly this time. New identity, new city, everything you need to actually vanish. She pulled an envelope from her purse, thick with what I assumed was cash. Walk away from my nephew before you destroy him. Or before he destroys you. I stared at the envelope. At the escape it represented. He'll know you helped me, I said. He'll be angry. But he'll be alive. She set the envelope on the vanity beside the phone. That's all that matters to me. Not his happiness. Not his heart, just his survival. She moved toward the door, paused with her hand on the handle. You have until midnight. After that, the offer expires. And whatever happens next, she looked back at me, and for a moment, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Whatever happens next is on both of you. The door closed behind her. I stood alone with two choices, a phone connecting me to Dante, and an envelope promising freedom. Both felt like lies. Chapter 8. When the wolf bleeds, he burned the money. Not all at once, bill by bill, feeding the fireplace in my room until the envelope was empty and the air smelled like ash and poor decisions. I watched the flames consume Bianca's offer, her certainty that I was dangerous to Dante, her belief that love was a weakness instead of a weapon. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was falling. Maybe that would destroy us both. But I'd spent 8 months running, and I was tired of being saved by people who thought they knew better. I was still staring at the embers when the building shook, not an earthquake. An explosion, somewhere below, close enough that the windows rattled and the lights flickered. Then came the gunfire, sharp, rapid cracks that my body recognized before my brain did. They're here. I grabbed the phone from the vanity, Danny's number already highlighted. My finger hovered over the call button. The door burst open. Matteo stumbled in, blood spreading across his shoulder, his usually immaculate suit torn. We need to move, now. What's happening? Luca brought an army. He grabbed my arm, pulled me toward the door. 20 men, maybe more. They breached the ground floor. We can't. Another explosion. Closer this time. The building groaned. Where's Dante? My voice was surprisingly steady. Downstairs. Fighting. Matteo's face was gray beneath the blood. We have a safe room on the 4th floor. Reinforced? You'll be. I'm not hiding while he's trying to keep you alive. Matteo's composure cracked. That's all he cares about right now. Not the building. Not his men. You. So please, Signorina, let us do our job. Guilt twisted in my chest. Bianca had been right about one thing. I was a distraction. A liability. While Dante fought for his empire, he was also fighting for me. We ran. The hallway was chaos. Men in dark suits moving with military precision. Shouts in Italian. The acrid smell of gunpowder and something burning. Matteo half dragged me up the stairs. His breathing labored, blood leaving a trail behind us. We made it to the 4th floor. He pushed open a door hidden behind a bookshelf. revealing a small room with concrete walls and no windows. A panic room. Inside, he ordered. Matteo, your shoulder inside. I stepped through. He started to follow, then jerked suddenly. His eyes went wide. He looked down at his chest, where a red stain was spreading. No, the word ripped from my throat. He fell forward. I caught him, but his weight drove us both to the floor. Behind him stood a man I didn't recognize, young, wild-eyed, holding a gun that was still smoking. Found you, he said in heavily accented English. A smile split his face. Luca will be so pleased. He raised the gun. I didn't think. Grabbed Matteo's weapon from his holster, aimed, squeezed the trigger the way Marcus had taught me during one terrible weekend in Nevada, when I'd still believed we were something normal. The recoil nearly broke my wrist. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. The man dropped. I stared at what I'd done, at the body on the floor, at the gun in my shaking hands. Good shot. Matteo's voice was wet. Wrong. Your ex teach you that? Don't talk. I pressed my hands against his chest, trying to stop the bleeding. Too much blood. Too fast. Save your strength, Sophia. He grabbed my wrist with surprising force. The phone. Call Dante. Tell him North Stairwell is compromised. They're coming from. His eyes rolled back. Matteo. I shook him. Stay with me, please. Matteo. Nothing. I don't know how long I knelt there. Seconds. Hours. Time had stopped meaning anything. Then footsteps. Multiple sets. Coming closer. I grabbed Matteo's gun again, my gun now, I supposed, and aimed it at the door. My hands were covered in blood. His blood. The blood of the man I'd killed. I couldn't tell which was which anymore. The door opened. Dante stood there. He was a nightmare made flesh. Blood on his face, his shirt, his hands. A cut across his cheek, still bleeding. His eyes were wild, desperate, scanning the room until they found me. Sophia. Relief and horror warred in his voice. He took in the scene: Matteo's body, the dead man behind me, the gun in my trembling hands. Dio mio, are you hurt? I shook my head. Couldn't speak. He crossed to me in 3 strides, pulled me up, and crushed me against his chest. I felt his heart hammering, felt his hands running over me, checking for injuries, felt him shaking. I thought his voice broke. When they breached the floor, I thought Matteo saved me. I managed. And then I killed someone. He pulled back just enough to see my face. His hands cupped my jaw, and his thumbs wiped away tears I hadn't realized were falling. Look at me, Sophia. Look at me. I did. You're alive, he said fiercely. That's all that matters. Do you understand? You're alive. He's not. I looked at Matteo's body. He died protecting me. Because you told him to. Because I know Dandy's voice was steel. Because Luca is a monster who doesn't understand that some things are worth dying for. His forehead pressed against mine. Some people are worth dying for. More footsteps. Dante spun, putting himself between me and the door, gun appearing in his hand like magic. But it was Carlo, bloodied, but alive. Boss, Luca's retreating. We have him cornered in the east wing. Your orders? Dante's jaw tightened. He looked at me, then at Carlo. When he spoke, his voice was death itself. Bring him to me. Alive. I want him to see what happens when you threaten what's mine. He turned back to me, and despite the violence, despite the death, despite everything, I didn't flinch. Stay here, he said softly. I'll end this, I promise. Then he was gone, and I was alone with the bodies and the terrible understanding that I'd crossed a line I could never uncross. I'd killed someone to protect myself, and I'd do it again. Chapter 9. The reckoning brought Luca to the study. I wasn't supposed to be there. Carlo had tried to stop me, but I'd pushed past him with Matteo's gun still in my hand and blood drying on my clothes. No one tried again after that. The building was quiet now. The kind of quiet that follows violence. Broken glass crunched under my feet. Bullet holes pocked the walls like smallpox scars. 3 of Danny's men lay dead in the hallway, covered with sheets that were already soaking through. The cost of protecting me. I found Dante in his study, standing by the window. He'd cleaned the blood from his face, but not his hands. They were still stained dark, and when he heard me enter, he didn't turn around. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. Neither should Matteo. Neither should those men in the hallway. I moved closer, my voice steadier than I felt. But here we are. He finally turned. The lamp cast shadows across his face, making him look older, harder. Sophia, the door opened. Carlo and two others dragged Luca inside. He was barely conscious, his face a mess of bruises and blood. They threw him into a chair, and his head lolled forward. "Wake him up," Dante ordered. Carlo slapped him. Once, twice. Luca's eyes fluttered open, unfocused. When they found Dante, something like fear flickered through them. "Dante," his voice was thick, slurred. We can talk about this. Talk." Dante moved toward him with predatory grace. "You want to talk? After you killed 4 of my men at the shipment? After you attacked my home? After you," his hand shot out, grabbed Luca by the throat. "After you tried to kill her?" Luca's eyes slid to me. Even broken, there was hate there. "The waitress. You're really going to war over a dandy's fist connected with his jaw?" The crack echoed through the room. Luca's head snapped back, blood spraying. "Say another word about her," Dante said softly, "and I'll cut out your tongue." I should have been horrified, should have looked away. Instead, I watched. Remembered Matteo's body growing cold. Remembered the weight of the gun in my hand. Remembered 8 months of running from men who thought they owned the world. "Why?" Dante asked. "Tell me why you did this. Why? You started a war you couldn't win." Luca spat blood onto the expensive rug. "Because you're weak. Because you've lost your edge. Because the families are tired of bowing to a man who," he laughed, a wet, ugly sound. "A man who's gone soft over a woman." Again, the temperature in the room dropped. "Elena's death should have taught you," Luca continued, his words coming faster now, desperate or suicidal. "But no, the great Dante Salvatore, he thinks he's different. Thinks he can have power and love. Thinks Danny's gun was out before I could blink." Pressed against Luca's forehead. "Don't," I said. Everyone turned to look at me. Dandy's hand didn't waver, but his eyes found mine. "He tried to kill you." "I know. He killed Matteo. Good men. He burned my home." "I know. Then why?" The gun stayed pressed against Luca's skull. "Why shouldn't I end this right now?" I moved closer, until I stood beside Dante, close enough to touch him. "Because if you kill him, you prove him right. You prove that I made you weak. That caring about me made you lose control." I held his gaze. "And we both know that's not true." Something shifted in his expression. Understanding, maybe. Or surprise that I understood him at all. "He needs to pay," Dante said roughly. "There has to be a reckoning." "There will be." I looked at Luca, at his swollen face and broken pride. "But not like this. Not in rage. Not in a way that makes you the villain in this story." Luca laughed again, weaker this time. "Listen to her. Your little waitress playing at being." I grabbed the gun from Dandy's hand. Turned it on. "Luca." My finger on the trigger. "Steady now. No shaking." "I killed a man tonight," I said quietly. "Your man." "Shot him in the chest and watched him die. So before you dismiss me as some helpless girl, remember that I'm the reason you're still breathing." Fear bloomed in Luca's eyes. Real fear. "Sophia." Dandy's voice was low. "Careful. What are you doing?" "What? You can't." I didn't lower the gun. "He's right about one thing. You've changed. You're trying to be better than what this life makes you. Trying to be someone Elena would have been proud of. Someone who doesn't solve every problem with violence. That's not how this world works. Then change the world." I finally looked at him. "You have the power, the resources, the fear. Use it differently. Show the families that strength isn't just about who can kill faster. It's about who can build something that lasts." Dante stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "And him? Give him to the police. The real ones, not the ones you pay. Let him face trial for tonight, for the murders, for everything." I lowered the gun. "Let justice be public, legal. Let everyone see that Dante Salvatore doesn't need to hide in the shadows anymore. They'll never convict him. His family has just lost all their leverage." Carlo spoke up from the doorway. "We have surveillance footage of the attack. Bodies, weapons, enough evidence to bury the Terranova family for a generation." He paused. "If we're willing to expose ourselves in the process." The silence stretched. Dante took back his gun, then pulled out his phone. Made a call. Spoke in rapid Italian. When he hung up, he looked at Luca. "The FBI will be here in 20 minutes. They'll find you, the evidence, an anonymous tip about your family's operations." His smile was cold. "Enjoy federal prison, Luca. I hear it's lovely this time of year." Luca's face went white. "You can't. My family will. Your family will pretend you never existed." Dante turned away, dismissing him. Carlo, make sure he's comfortable until our guests arrive. As they dragged Luca out, Dante finally faced me fully, took my blood-stained hands in his. You saved me tonight, he said softly. Not from him, from myself. Chapter 10. What remains after fire? The FBI took 3 hours to process the scene. I watched from the study window as they loaded Luca into an unmarked car, his head down, his empire crumbling. Watched as they cataloged the damage, photographed the bodies, spoke in hushed tones with Dandy's lawyer, a woman in a steel gray suit who looked like she ate federal prosecutors for breakfast. Dante had disappeared an hour ago. Business to handle, Carlo had said, which I'd learned meant bodies to move, stories to align, evidence to arrange just so. The art of making truth look like truth. When the last federal vehicle finally pulled away, dawn was breaking over the city. Pink and gold light streamed through the broken windows, illuminating the destruction. Blood on marble, bullet holes in priceless art, the ruins of a fortress that hadn't held. I was still standing there when Dante returned. He looked exhausted. Lines around his eyes I hadn't noticed before. His shirt was fresh, but his hair was disheveled, and there was a heaviness in his shoulders that hadn't been there even after the fighting. Matteo's family? I asked quietly. Taken care of. He moved to the desk, poured 2 glasses of whiskey despite the hour, handed me one. His sister will want for nothing. His nephew's education is paid through graduate school, and his name, his voice roughened. His name will be remembered with honor. It should be. I took a sip. The whiskey burned. He died for me. He died for me. For this family. For what we're trying to build. Dante drank, then set down his glass with deliberate care. You were right. About Luca. About doing this differently. But that doesn't make it hurt less. I understood. The weight of being right. The cost of choosing justice over vengeance. What happens now? I asked. Now? He laughed. But there was no humor in it. Now the families will watch. They'll wait to see if turning Luca over to the feds was genius or suicide. They'll test me, push boundaries, try to find the cracks in this new version of leadership. He looked at me. And they'll want to know who you are, what you mean to me. My heart stumbled. What do I mean to you? He crossed the distance between us, took the glass from my hand and set it beside his. When he touched my face, his palm was warm, steady. You're the woman who walked toward danger when everyone else ran. The woman who killed to protect herself. The woman who stopped me from becoming the monster I was afraid of becoming. His thumb traced my cheekbone. You're everything I shouldn't want and the only thing I can't stop wanting. Dante, I'm in love with you. The words were quiet, certain, devastating. I know it's too soon. I know it's dangerous. I know it makes us both vulnerable in ways we can't afford. But I'm tired of pretending. Tired of fighting what I feel. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think past the way he was looking at me. Like I was something precious. Something worth the ruins around us. I can't promise you safety, he continued. Can't promise you normal. This life, my life, it's always going to be complicated, dangerous. There will always be people like Luca who want to hurt what I care about. His forehead touched mine. But I can promise you honesty, loyalty, everything I am and everything I have. If you want it. What if I don't? My voice was barely a whisper. What if I take Bianca's advice and run? Disappear again? Pain flickered across his face. Then I'd let you go. I'd make sure you had everything you needed to vanish properly. To be safe. He paused. And then I'd spend the rest of my life wondering what we could have been. I thought about Phoenix. About Marcus and the life I'd fled. About 8 months of hiding, of being invisible, of convincing myself that safety meant being alone. I thought about Matteo's body, the gun in my hand, the moment I'd realized I wasn't running anymore. I thought about the way Dante looked at me, like I was brave instead of broken, like my scars made me stronger, not weaker. I can't go back to being invisible, I said, finally. Can't go back to pretending I'm someone I'm not. I would never ask you to. And I can't be Elena. The name hurt to say, but it needed saying. I can't be the woman you lost. I'm too damaged, too sharp, he kissed me. Not gentle this time, desperate, claiming. His hands tangled in my hair, pulling me closer, and I surrendered to it, to him, to the terrible, wonderful inevitability of this. When we broke apart, we were both shaking. I don't want you to be Elena, he said roughly. I want you to be Sophia, the woman who stood up to me, who challenged me, who made me want to be better than what I was. His hands framed my face. Stay, please? Not because I'm forcing you, not because you're afraid, but because you want this. Want us? I looked into his eyes, saw the vulnerability there, the hope, the fear that I'd say no. I thought about art history, about frozen moments, about a life spent studying things that never changed, never surprised, never hurt. I thought about how boring that life had been. Okay, I whispered, okay, I'll stay. I touched his face, felt the stubble, the warmth, the proof that he was real. But I have conditions. A smile ghosted across his lips. Of course you do. I'm not hiding anymore. If I'm part of your life, I'm part of your life. Not a secret, not a liability, a partner, agreed. And I want to work. Not at Aurelio's, something real. My degree, my skills, something that's mine. I own a gallery in Soho. It needs a curator. The job is yours if you want it. And I took a breath. And if this doesn't work, if we crash and burn and destroy each other, then at least we'll have tried. He kissed me again, softer this time. At least we'll have had this. Outside, the sun climbed higher. The city woke. Life continued, indifferent to the small revolution happening in this broken study. Dante Salvatore, the man who'd built an empire on fear, held me like I was salvation. And I, the woman who'd spent 8 months running, finally stood still.